compare yourself to who you were yesterday. What are you doing every day to put yourself in a different place than you were the previous day?
Yeah.
As opposed to comparing yourself to somebody else, compare yourself to yourself.
Yeah.
Are you making changes? Are you improving?
Bars.
That's it. That's enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of season 2 of Is It in the Budget? My name is Obioha Okereke, and today I'm joined by, I don't know, maybe our most special guest, which is my twin brother, Chukuwma.
Hello.
And for those of you who don't know, I do have a twin brother. I also have an older sister. You've likely seen Chukuwma before on Instagram, or you've heard about him if you've listened to the podcast before. If you've listened to any of my presentations, I've referenced him before. We, of course, grew up together in Washington. You now live in New York. Throughout this episode, we're going to be talking a bit about our childhood, our relationships with money, maybe touch on our relationships as well. And then also just hopefully share some perspective on our different perspectives on money and how we've managed money throughout our lives. But before then, for people who have never met you or never seen you before, do you mind introducing yourself and just sharing a bit more about your background and what you're up to today?
Yeah. My name is Chukuwma Okereke. I'm a grad student at Columbia University, getting my master's in public health right now. I'm in New York. I live up in Harlem. It's a fun area. I'm into fashion. I think that's where a good portion of my finances go.
Yes.
Or they have over the years. Other than that, you know, I like traveling. I'm a big, I don't want to say a foodie, but I enjoy food a lot. That's another place where my budget goes towards. I went to UW here in Seattle and I studied medical anthropology. But other than that, I'm very, interested in public health, fashion, and having a good time.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I know that I've definitely posted you many times before, and I know typically on our birthday, since we, of course, share a birthday, there is a picture of you that appears on Instagram. I also wanted to mention that in the very first episode of this podcast, I mentioned that the origin of Is It in the Budget was through my mom. Of course, that is our mom, and how she used to say growing up, that's not in the budget, especially when it came to us asking for like fast food and things like that. And so I'm sure you can relate to that and understand that. So shout out to you, Mom. Now, I do have a bit of a bone to pick with you. I'm curious, how come in our 26 years of life, including the 3 years that I've had my platform, you've never asked me for financial advice?
That's a good question.
Not once.
That's a good question. Why are you crying?
Let's talk about it.
I think because you give your advice. What's the word? No, it's
like not spontaneously. I know what you're saying. Like
you give your advice.
I know the word
naturally, but it's like prompted. Yeah. I think the reason could be
unsolicited. Right? Like unsolicited advice.
Yeah, I think that has a negative connotation to it, but I think you like to talk about finance a lot. That's your bread and butter, and so a lot of your tips and whatnot comes up naturally without me having to ask for it. And now you have your platform, so I don't need to ask necessarily. But I recognize the fact that I can have asked more questions and probably should have, because I'm not a financial guru.
Yeah, I don't think you need to aspire to be either.
No, I think, but within the financial realm, I think there's still a lot I need to learn, and, I plan to learn. So I think there's a lot more I could have asked. When you have your platform as you do, I feel like it's just naturally comes to me. Just, it bleeds into me by association. But I think there is more I could have asked for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to fault you or pick an argument. I think one of the craziest things to me is I post, I feel like weekly on high yield savings accounts.
Oh,
and
I recently got a high yield savings account.
Congratulations.
When I got that does not matter.
Yeah, that was yesterday. So I've been posting.
We'll cut that.
I've been posting so much about high yield savings accounts and the advantages of high yield savings accounts, and I think one of the things on my mind was, what does it say about me that I'm doing all of this and promoting that people should be doing this, and then my siblings, the two people closest to me, they don't have high yield savings accounts.
I'll say for me, I think this past year is when high yield savings accounts came to my radar, and I think you started sharing about them more.
Yeah.
And I think this came at a time where I'm in school, and the money that I do make, I'm not really able to save necessarily. Like I do invest it, and I think that's where I sort of prioritize rather than putting it in like my savings account. So I think one thing I could have done is transferring what I already have saved to a high yield savings account. But I think I've been whatever I have left over after paying rent and making from my part-time job is what I've been investing. So I've been looking at that as my high yield savings.
Oh boy.
What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What was that? But I think I've been focusing more on putting it in my Robinhood account than putting it in a high yield savings account.
In that you were saving in your investment account, is what you're saying?
I guess, yeah. And investing.
Okay. For people listening, it's always a good idea to invest. It's always, I think, if you can do both, invest and save, it's a very wise decision. One thing I think that's especially important as it relates to investing and saving is to make sure that you have separate savings from your investments, especially an emergency savings fund, in the event that all your investments, something happens to them or the market goes down, to make sure that, especially in your case, you can continue to pay for rent and if needed, pay for your tuition and things of that nature. I do want to congratulate you on opening your first high yield savings account. I mean, it doesn't really matter when it happened. The fact that it happened is still an achievement in and of itself. So very good job on that. I know that I believe you're using Marcus by Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, shout out to Calvin for the referral and the extra 1%.
There you go. And I think Ephraim, you use Marcus as well. Okay. And I believe my girlfriend uses Marcus also. I personally use Ally Bank for my high yield savings account. But if you're listening to this and you don't have a high yield savings account, I would encourage you to look into getting one. Reasons being that with a high yield savings account, the primary advantage is that you are earning more money in interest than you would with a regular savings account. Presently, many high yield savings accounts will offer rates kind of in the ballpark of 3% to 5%, allowing you to earn some passive income. And I know that for myself, when I opened my high yield savings account, I believe this was in 2020, I earned $7 my first month. This past year in 2023, I earned $2,800 and some change in interest alone from my high yield savings account, and that doesn't include money that I earned from my job, money that I earned from my investments, dividends that I earned from my investments, and then also business income. And so you can think of it really at scale as another income stream. I do want to talk first about our childhood. I know that growing up, I always compared myself to you, and I know that on this podcast and also through my platform, I talk a lot about not comparing yourself to other people because of how unhealthy it is. And I know that I presented with one of our friends, Kyrie, late last year, and one thing that he mentioned is that comparisons is the thief of joy, which I think is a well-known saying. And I know that, I mean, it didn't happen as much in college, a little bit in college, but also just kind of like growing up where I was saying like Chukuwma's got better fashion than me. Oh, Chukuwma's getting more attention from women than me. Chukuwma looks better than me. All these like things and really like getting, I know it's crazy, right? Exactly. We don't look alike. And getting down on myself on all these things. And then that like manifested and grew where I was then comparing myself to other people. And I was like, that person has a nicer car than me. That person has nicer clothing than me. And all of these various things. And it was just so unhealthy. Yeah. And one thing that I didn't learn it quickly, but I ended up learning it eventually, is like none of that shit matters. And just set your own goals, define life through your own lenses or through your own lens rather. And it's just so much easier than like constantly saying like, this person has this person has that, or why haven't I done this yet, or I haven't achieved that yet. And I think that social media makes it infinitely worse, where every day you're inundated with people who are doing X, Y, and Z, and you're like, I wanted to do that. Yeah. I just saw something where I think old me would have been like, damn, I'm jealous, I'm envious. But it's kind of like, like, good for that person. Yeah. That's something that I'd like to achieve in the future. Like, how can I get there? What steps do I need to take in order to get there? And I think that's a very important transition in a way of thinking that like I had to go through. But I don't know like for you, like if you've ever had to deal with, like if you ever compared yourself to anybody, or if you ever had to deal with that same thing that I struggled with, because I didn't really communicate that to anybody, of course, for obvious reasons.
No, yeah, that is, I mean, I think it's every day. Like, it's not something that I think really goes away, like the comparison. Like, I am brothers with you who people see your salary or your net worth. So that is not my net worth. I have to remind myself, we're all on our own paths,
Yep.
If what someone else has, looks good, is that what I want for myself? Is something I ask for myself. But yeah, I compare myself to you all the time. I compare myself to everyone I see on social media, people in my circle, in my friendship circle. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm happy for them and what they've achieved. I know, like, I think I'm on a good path. Like, I think I'm where I'm meant to be, basically. And so, even though I'm surrounded with these people who are in the tech industry or lawyers and all these different things, they're making a lot of money. I see people going on like 10 trips in a year. I'm like, I would like to do that. But it's all in good time. I'm enjoying my life. I'm able to smile every day. So it's, try not to compare your people. Like, it's just impossible not to compare yourself. But at the end of the day, like, you're on a good path. Like, you're doing your shit. It's all good. Everything's going to work out. So I know you talked about comparing yourself to me and, social media, but how did you make the transition to not comparing yourself all the time, or at least not it negatively impacting you?
I think one of the earliest things that helped was track and field in high school. Through that, I found something that I was exceptionally good at. And it was also just something that was fun. And it was a moment in my life where I like finally started to build up some self-esteem and some confidence. And then thereafter, so thinking like post-college, I do think that having the financial foundation that I did helped. I know that sometimes you see people like, oh, would you rather cry in a Honda or would you rather cry in a Ferrari? I think looking at my accounts and seeing money and seeing a decent amount of it helps. It helps the mental. I don't think it didn't make me happy. I won't say that, but I do think when it comes to comparisons, the thing that ultimately helped me was just reminding myself, as you mentioned before, like everybody has a different path. Everybody grew up differently. Yep. Everybody has different lived experiences. It's not fair to myself to compare myself to somebody like that I don't even know, let alone, compare myself to you or compare myself to somebody across the country who's buying a house earlier than I'm buying a house or buying my dream car before I'm buying my dream car. What has helped has been writing down my goals and then figuring out what's the most realistic path for me to obtain that goal. And then when I achieve my goals, I celebrate them. I did it. Did I hit it late? Maybe. Does it matter? No. Because it's my journey. It's my book. It's my story. It's not anybody else's. And so present day, now whenever I catch myself comparing myself to somebody else, it's like, oh, why am I doing this? Good for them. What can I do? And then I just move on. Because there's no value. And I think the other thing is compare yourself to who you were yesterday. What are you doing every day to put yourself in a different place than you were the previous day? As opposed to comparing yourself to somebody else, compare yourself to yourself. Are you making changes? Are you improving?
Bars.
That's it. That's enough.
Okay. We're going to stop it there.
Okay. I know that maybe there wasn't like a ton of discussion about money directly growing up. Do you have any, I guess, early memories of money or talking about money, interacting with money? We did receive an allowance when we were younger. But hoping you could share a little bit of how you felt about money growing up.
I would say I think my earliest memories are like getting an allowance. And I think that was like $20 allowance that we got from our parents. And it definitely doesn't go that far now. I think back then you could buy you like a whole brand new pair of shoes. So I think that's like where my budget went towards. And when I started working, I would sort of, put that into, I started working at Big Five, and I think that's where my money, I would get like shoes there. So I think it started, sort of getting like the off-brand clothing things that I thought were cool, like off-brand Converse and stuff like that. And I think that's sort of where my fashion interests sort of started. Other than that, yeah, I do remember not being able to get fast food all the time. But I think that was also just because of, health reasons rather than,
Right. Yeah.
they just don't want us to be happy or anything like that.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't think I saw like our parents stress about money necessarily. So in turn, I don't think I stressed about money.
I think that's fair. I know that I could remember back when, because I wasn't a beggar, but like asking our parents to like buy me stuff, or when we're on vacation, like, oh, let's go do this.
Yeah.
And then hearing back, oh, we can't afford it, or like we don't have enough money to do that. I remember telling you, and I can't remember if this was in college or if this was in high school, that like I never want to worry about money. I never want to be in a position where there's something that I want to get that I can't get, let alone something that I need that I won't be able to afford. I feel like that's also something that you and I have discussed, especially as we've grown older and actually have need-based expenses. Yeah. And I know that, we lived together for 1 year. Yeah. You and I have talked a lot about money. I know that within our relationships, we've also talked about money quite a bit. But I'm curious, how would you describe your relationship with money throughout time? Mm-hmm. And how would you just describe your relationship with money right now? And you can look beyond just unhealthy relationship, healthy relationship, but like how would you describe it?
I think it's a very relaxed relationship. I don't think okay. I think I try not to stress about it. I don't nitpick necessarily like my finances. I try to do a good job, saving, investing and those things. But unfortunately I don't budget every day and things like that. So I think that's like where I'm transitioning to now. But I've definitely been more relaxed and thinking like, I know I'm going to make it back. I know I'm going to make it back. So I'm not going to,
I'm laughing just because you mentioned, you're going to make it back. And I think that's I think it's a good mentality. I think one could argue that it's an unsafe mentality.
Yeah, I think it's unhealthy.
One other thing that you mentioned that I want to comment on is you mentioned that unfortunately you don't budget every day, but I would argue that you don't need to budget every day. Not everybody needs to. Yeah. I think starting out, if you don't have a strong financial foundation, then yes, you should budget, and budgeting should be something that is more top of mind for you. In all honesty, I don't budget. I'm not like an active person. I don't actively budget because of automating my savings, and which is something that we've talked about, where every month I have automation that's sending money to my savings accounts. It's also sending money to my investments as well, where I don't need to track, this amount's going to food or this is going to X, Y, and Z, because there's so many layers to the automation that I have where money's being sent into like a vacation bucket, a emergency fund, and all these things where the money that's left over I can spend, and whatever happens. Right. So I do think that like starting from ground zero, a budget is necessary, but you may not, speaking about you specifically, not people listening, but you may not need one. And for people who are listening, yes, you should always have a clear direction as far as where your money's going. Right. Whether you're reviewing it every month to see, okay, this is how much I spent on this area, because that allows you to refine how you're spending your money. But I think the idea of like tracking every dollar may not be necessary.
Yeah. I think it can just be a little bit overwhelming and not allow you to really enjoy life. But yeah, automating your expenses, I think, is a really good way to take your mind, but also make sure your money is going to the right places. So I do that. I do like automate like where my investments are, where my funds are going in my investments. But I think going into this new year, I really do want to pay a little bit more attention to the buckets that I have for spending and like shopping, especially like trying to monitor those areas a little bit more closely. 'Cause I know, especially with this move to New York and all the restaurants that are around, I think I let it go by the wayside a little bit. So I think that's one of my goals for the new year.
Yeah, and I think that leads us to the next topic, which is delayed gratification. We've had many a discussion about delayed gratification, and you mentioned earlier that you like food. You also like clothing. We are alike in that we spend a bit in those categories, and I know that when I had my girlfriend Sesson on, we did talk about food, spending on food as well. I think the average person, if you're listening to this, a lot of people spend a lot of money on food, and it's because food tastes good. New restaurants come up where it's like, I'm into banh mi sandwiches right now. And so, I won't pass up a banh mi.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I think that as far as like coming back to delayed gratification, when it comes to things that you really like and things that you really enjoy spending money on, it is important to set boundaries. Yeah. I guess a question to you, I think you know the answer, is would you say that you've always set that boundary?
No, no, I don't think so. I think it's something I'm getting better at, because
Right.
I think it is hard to say no, especially if other people are involved. That is not just myself. If it's, friends inviting you out to a night out or something, or
Right.
to a dinner, it's like, oh, yeah, like of course I'm gonna, like, I don't know when I'm gonna see this friend again or something like this. I do struggle to say no, and I think I'm getting better at it for myself. I think one example that I think I've been looking for some black cowboy boots for years now, since I got my first pair of cowboy boots, like when we went to Portland in like 2019, I think. So I've been on Grailed and going through the shops trying to find. It's also hard to find a size 12. So I just got back in Seattle earlier this week, and I saw some nice pairs, like some of the best pairs I've seen, and they're probably ranging from like $200 to $1,000. And I was like,
It's quite a bit.
maybe not. And then I went to my guy Jason at Lucky Lemons, and he had a pair of black cowboy boots for $60. And I was like, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been waiting for how many years. So I finally secured those boots, and I think that was, for me, a good measure of delaying gratification when it comes to clothing, which I have not always been good at, but I think that was a good reinforcement for me that I can do it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example. I also want to take it a step further so if you haven't heard of the term delay gratification, it essentially means that you're putting off immediate satisfaction or an immediate reward with the intent of seeking something larger in the future, or seeing larger benefits. So in the context of us and our spending on clothing, that could be not buying clothing every time that we want to or we can afford to, in order for us to save money so that we can like buy a car or buy a house or go on vacations. Mm-hmm. You can apply it the same way with food, not buying food as often so that you can save or invest.
Yep.
I think because we're both 26 years old, soon to be 27. By the time this is released, we might be 27. And delay gratification is just so important, because if you can't master it early, it becomes that much harder to master it later in life.
Yeah.
With this idea of delay gratification, I do want to talk about you moving out. And so we grew up, of course, in Washington, and we lived together with our parents and our sister before she left for California.
Yeah.
And in college, you moved out.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what year, but actually you moved to live
Junior
with...
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were living with Ephraim, who is behind the camera here, along with some other friends of ours. And I remember at the time, I was baffled. I was like, oh, why would you move out when you can just stay home and save money? Like, what are the advantages of moving out? And I think that you can speak to those advantages, because I think there were tons of them.
Yeah.
And so I guess, what were the advantages of making that decision? Because, of course, there were benefits and then, like, pros and cons.
Yeah. Probably the main advantage is just freedom to do, like, what you want when you want to. I know you are familiar with our parents, and, living in a Nigerian household, I think, even though they're not, the most strict people, there's still, boundaries that they set, and, they had a curfew at a point. It's, I think, just having the freedom to, hang out with friends and do whatever at whenever I want to is a big thing. I also had a job on campus, so I was able to quickly access my job by just biking down to the health center. I think that cuts away from the commute, which can also sometimes be something that drains you. Just being in close proximity to campus helped. I also like to socialize and go to different events on campus. And when I commuted, there would always be something in the back of my head like, oh, I need to be home like by this time. And I have to worry about parking on campus and all these different things. So I just wanted, the college experience, I guess. And I think I was able to get that my junior year. And then I went back home afterwards. And I don't have any regrets doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And also, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. Part of the reason I wanted to have this discussion with you is, if people haven't realized it yet, we have very different perspectives on money and spending money and saving money. And I think that's shown up in different areas of our lives, not always positive for myself, not always positive for yourself. And with this decision to move, I think there's several different layers to it, where moving out, of course, has the advantage of you don't have to deal with your parents anymore, or as much.
Yeah, I mean,
I think you still had to come home every
yeah,
Sunday.
we still come home Sunday, have dinner.
And I think the opposite of that is you don't get to save as much money because now you have to pay for rent and then utilities and things of that nature. While I do advocate for staying at home to save money, I also recognize that it's not an option for everybody. Yeah. Not everybody lives in an environment where that is safe or where that is healthy. You, of course, did live in an environment where it would have been fine, for you to stay. I know that because I've posted about this, one of the biggest contributors to my, I suppose, financial wellness or financial success is my decision to stay at home for several years. And I know that's one area where we've we haven't butted heads on it, but we've, as far as disagreed on the approach there. And we did end up living together for a year, and I got to experience what it's like to pay bills, of course.
Finer experiences.
But I think what I'll say is, and I mean, feel free to be as transparent as you're willing here. When I did make that decision to leave home for that year and live with you in an apartment, it wasn't stressful because I had spent the prior years living at home and saving money and building an emergency fund. So there was never a concern for me about, will I be able to maintain the lifestyle that I've enjoyed while also now having to pay an additional $2,000 a month for rent and parking and utilities. It was never a question because I already had that set aside. Yeah. And I do think that when making that decision to move out, and this is not me speaking to you, this is just kind of in a general sense, that it shouldn't be hasty. I know that for many people, if you don't have to do that, I would encourage you to consider the value in staying behind if it'll allow you to save money. Yeah. Now, if it won't, or if it's unhealthy mentally, probably not a good decision.
Yeah, I think it's really important to consider what your goals are. Within, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I know you've had the goal of buying a house, and you have to pay for the upkeep of your car and all these different things. So I think it depends. I had the goal of being more active, in Seattle, I guess, without the restrictions of being at home.
I mean, when you're at home, because we had a curfew.
Yeah, and so I think one of on the back end is the safety aspect. I don't want to be trying to rush home at 1 a.m. Trying to make it home so my parents aren't mad at me. That can get frustrating, and I think it's not good. Cannot be good for the relationship sometimes. But
I will say that one of the advantages that I think we can both agree on, because you mentioned it already, is I really enjoyed the relationship that we had with our parents when we didn't live at home.
Yeah.
Where every moment you see them is that much more valuable because you're not seeing them every day. And so the time that you are together, it's let's really enjoy this moment. Yeah. And enjoy one another's company. Where if I'm seeing you every day, it's okay, yeah.
What is the quote? Is distance makes the heart grow fonder?
Oh, I mean, there you go. Yeah. Because I remember it was one thing that I had talked to you about before I moved out with you, where I was I hope I experience this. And I was thinking it was going to happen. And then when it did, it was just, I was I can understand why you and then Chicha, your sister, have enjoyed. Granted, she, I guess, doesn't come back as frequently.
That's a distance thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's another thing that played into my moving out the second time when I moved to South Lake Union, once again with Ephraim. I was also working for our dad at this point. I think having boundaries, it's hard to, toe the line between father-son and then sort of employee relationship. I'm too accessible, in my opinion. And so I think that sort of...
Too accessible, staying home while also working for him?
Yeah, I think, conversations tend to lean towards work, and it's hard to create a boundary when you're living with the person that you're working with. So I wanted to make that distance, which is, I think, fed into the second time I moved out, even though this was during COVID, so probably not the best decision. But I was able to start work full-time soon after, and I wasn't too, worried financially. And I think, going back on the weekends and whatnot, I think the relationship definitely got better for me. Those are a couple of things that fed into the decision. I want to hear from your perspective why you stayed home and how you managed staying home throughout college and commuting to school and just working from home and also managing a relationship with our parents and how that went.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely grew closer to our parents while I was at home because being the only one of their 3 children who was still there, I was the self-appointed star child is what I called myself while I was there because I was like, I'm the only one of your children who didn't leave you behind. So we had that kind of like inside joke, but I mean, it definitely comes with its advantages and disadvantages. The perk is that there's comfort in being where you've grown up at. It's kind of I want to say safe space, but it's a space that you're used to.
Yeah.
There's no change that you have to experience while you're there.
Yeah.
Throughout college, I would say that it was fairly easy living there. I was also working at Nordstrom, and then I had an internship at Merrill Lynch, at least through junior year, and then I believe during my senior year as well. So I was busy. I wasn't like hanging out with my parents every day. And as far as like mentally, the decision to do it and then continue doing it, I had to ask myself, is this advantage of being able to save and invest and essentially have no bills, does it outweigh the sometimes negative mental and emotional impacts of being around your parents all the time?
Yeah.
And for me, the answer was yes. And that was because it wasn't that bad. And
no, it wasn't.
And also delayed gratification. I recognized, okay, if I stay here and I do this, there's going to be so many things that I can do in the future where my main goal was I want to get myself to a place early where I know I'll never need our parents financially. And I was willing to do kind of like whatever it would take to get there.
Yeah.
And I know that in college, basically as we were coming up to graduation, I set the goal of saving my first 100K,
right?
Where to me that number represented financial freedom, and I felt that okay, if I hit 100K, that means I'll never need to ask them for money. I don't need them financially for anything. Right. I will be okay. With that in mind, that's why I chose to stay not only with them during college but post college,
right? Because
that plan was only going to work. I basically using my plan, it was going to take 2 years to do that, but that was only if I stayed at home. And so at that time, of course, you were in South Lake Union with Ephraim. I was basically a hermit. I mean, I was a hermit throughout college. I was a hermit for those 2 years. COVID helped. Yeah. I just stayed at home and I just worked. I worked on creating my platform, College Money Habits, which would later spawn this podcast. And then also just working on my job and consulting. Yeah. In addition to that, saving and investing money. And then I ended up hitting that 100K. And then I continued to stay home because I was just like, it's so easy. And then around the time where you and I moved out, that was 2021? Yeah. Late 2021? Yeah. I was then at a point where it didn't make as much sense to stay. Oh. That was primarily because you were leaving to go to New York. Right. And I thought, hey, let's have one last hoorah. Stay, live together for 1 year before you dip out. Because in my mind, the moment you were going to leave to go to New York, it was kind of the end of that chapter of our lives. Right. Where in my mind, I wasn't sure if there was ever going to be a moment where we were going to be in the same state for an extended period of time. Yeah. Where, okay, this is like, our lives are moving on at this point. We're fully like going into adulthood. And then now, of course, with me planning to move to Atlanta and you staying in New York, the saga continues. And there's no telling where we'll both end up, where we'll both settle down. Yeah. But that's why I made that decision at that point. And there's absolutely no regrets. That was one of the best years, if not the best single year of my life. So it was a good year. And I think that all those years at home, saving money, helped make it easier and being able to pay for rent and making that transition without having to worry about money. Right. So with staying at home, there's also the stereotype that you're like a failure or you're like a weirdo if you're staying at home with your parents, especially the older you get, which was something that was kind of in the back of my mind while I was at home. And especially when you're single and you're dating. I don't want to say like I felt like a loser, but it's like I didn't feel as confident. Given that I was at home, and I also would have to like reflect and say, am I making the right decision? But not to sound, no, that's too shallow. But not to sound shallow, but when you look at the amount of money that you've saved or invested at that point, when I looked at my bank account, I didn't really care about the stereotype or what the thought of like, oh, people who are staying at home are like they're mooching or feeding off their parents. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's sort of a American sort of tradition where there's urge to move out of the house. But I think if you look at any other country, well, I can't make it.
Other cultures.
If you look at other cultures, it's very natural for the kids to stay up until their adulthood. Even when you get married, you might still stay around. So I think it's sort of an American thing. So it's definitely not anything to be, I think, shamed about. Something you should take advantage of, and I think you did very well.
Thank you.
I think, we have sort of different personalities where I think you are more of a homebody, I think. And
I agree.
I am not as much. So I think it made sense for my personality to be outside of the house.
But I do want to, I suppose, give a message to anyone who is living with their parents right now, who may be second guessing the decision, or who are unsure of whether or not to move back home. You're not a failure or a loser if you decide to live with your parents. It is sometimes a very good decision, especially when you think long term, which is the way that you should think, especially when it comes to finances. Right. It is oftentimes a wise decision where you can cut out so many expenses.
Yep.
By living with your parents, even if they charge you rent, God forbid.
It's still gonna be way less than what you'll pay in Seattle or New York or any of these cities.
Exactly. And so if you're currently living with your parents, you're not a failure. Keep doing it as long as you can tolerate it, and as long as it is a beneficial decision for you.
Right.
And don't look back. We briefly talked about relationships and how that can be a challenge when living with your parents, but moving beyond that and thinking about kind of like your financial well-being, getting yourself together financially is, I would argue, mandatory before getting into a relationship, let alone, I mean, one could argue it's not necessary to get into a relationship, but at least before marriage.
Yeah.
I know that for me, I always felt that I need to be confident in myself, confident in my finances before I enter into a long-term relationship. And I'm curious as far as your perspective on this idea of kind of like getting right before a relationship, especially if you've had any discussions about money in your relationship right now, because you've been dating your girlfriend for 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years yesterday.
Okay, hey, congrats. That's a long time.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful time. Yeah, I mean, we always talk about finances. I think my girlfriend, Amara, is very similar minded as yourself. She's, very into finance and budgeting and staying on top of her money. So we have, frequent conversations about money. And it's something that, as we talk about marriage as well, we know we're going to sit down and plot everything out and where all our finances are going, how we're going to split accounts, we'll talk about that. But yeah, I think before the relationship, so I don't think I ever had a period of time where I was looking for a relationship, looking like, oh, I need a girlfriend or anything like that. Okay. If things happen naturally, they happen naturally. And that's how it happened with Amara. And I think it happened at a time where I think it was a time I wasn't looking for someone because I was preparing to go to New York. And so I didn't want to start a relationship knowing that I didn't want a long distance relationship because I've never been in a relationship, and to have a long distance relationship as my first one was something I knew I didn't want to do. We started dating, and unluckily Amar had the same plans to go to New York. I think we were on separate timelines, so she was actually going to move a lot earlier than I was. But after she had gone and visited and sort of looked at apartments and stuff, she decided she was going to move later on. And so it happened that we moved to New York just 2 weeks apart, and I think that's a blessing. I'm blessed to have it happen that way. That we didn't really have to go through that period as we were growing the relationship, especially. I think it's important and really lucky to be close to each other. So I deferred going to Colombia for a year, and I was sort of the plan to sort of save my money, knowing that New York is an expensive place to live. At this time of wanting to save money, I was also I don't want to get in a relationship because I know that's going to add more expenses. And then my car had also just broken down, so it provided another level of I shouldn't be dating when I don't have a car in a city like Seattle, where I think it's important to have a car that you can drive around and go on dates. Right. So I mean,
we got good public transportation.
Amara's just an amazing person, so I think we had a few dates where it was really we went bowling and these different restaurants, and the activities we did were just amazing. I think we were really getting to know each other, where I was I would be a fool not to continue this relationship just because I don't have a car at the moment or any of these things. I don't want to, I think I said it a lot, I don't want to block the blessings that are coming into my life at this point. So we'll figure it out together. And so as the relationship goes on, and we always talk about like money and all these things. And I think she's helped me, be a little bit smarter about money, because she uses this app, YNAB, which I think is
you need a budget.
Yeah, for budgeting and whatnot. So I use that a little bit. I think I've stuck with Mint, but Mint's on the way out, so I think I might be transitioning back to YNAB. But she's taught me, just like you, to be a lot more mindful about where money goes and keeping track of it. But also about, I think, having one or two areas that like you are really invested in, that you're willing to spend on, which for me has been, I think, food in New York, because there's so many restaurants and we love to like go try new food, try new drinks, and all these different things. You mentioned earlier about getting right before a relationship, and I think I talked about sort of how I was I was on that path to get right, but this was for, I think, a separate reason. It was so I was prepared to be in school in New York. But then my girlfriend Amara came along, and I couldn't not pursue her, because I could see the value that she was already bringing to my life, and I wanted that relationship to continue. I don't have I don't have any regrets about not being, I don't want to say like super financially secure, because I think I was still doing fine. I was still working, saving, investing, all these different things, but I was I wasn't where I would hope to be, I guess, which is like the pinnacle of financial security. I think it's a process, and I'm lucky that she's someone who's smart about money. So it's in the relationship, as I think we both have goals for our finances, and we want to take trips together and all these things. We're not just throwing money at different places like without.
Yeah, you're thinking about your future.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm very lucky that she's mindful about these things too. So we're in this together.
Yeah. She
supports me. I support her. I think it's a good balance. But back to you.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. And I mean, shout out to both you and Amara, and thank you, Amara, for making this man a better person. Not that you weren't great already. Oh. In a previous episode, of course, Sesson, my girlfriend, was on here, and we talked about the importance of talking about money in relationships. Mm-hmm. And I do owe you and Amara thanks, because I learned about the importance of that through you both having those discussions.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this, again, if you're in a relationship, whether you're married or you're engaged or you're dating or whatever it may be, I would make sure to talk about money in your relationship. Granted, the depth at which you talk about money should be different based on the type of relationship you're in or the duration of that relationship. But a great way to start is by understanding your partner's values as it relates to money. What do they like to spend their money on? What is their future life look like?
Yeah, what is the lifestyle that they hope to have?
Exactly. And I remember that was a discussion I had with Sesson, because I realized I had no idea what she wanted her life to look like in the future. And so I had asked, like, do you like these things? Like, what would you want? What would you want in the future? Just so I could have some perspective, because I think it is important to be aligned.
Right.
Because it's better to know if you're not aligned early on, as opposed to, let's say you get married and come to find out, oh, you both have very different perspectives on how money should be spent, and that goes on to cause problems.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest causes of divorce, I think.
It is. I want to say it's number 3. So yeah, thank you for that. One thing that I like to do when I talk to students is ask them, what is your biggest financial regret? Mm-hmm. And that can vary from buying a pair of sneakers that they ended up not needing, or buying a car that later broke down.
Yeah.
I know that I have many financial regrets. I continue to make some small mistakes when it comes to money, but I'm curious to hear about you, of course, since we've known one another our entire lives.
Right.
What are your biggest financial regrets? And these regrets may be different from financial mistakes, but curious to hear what you're thinking.
I think I have 2 that come to mind. I think one was I was late to the credit card game. That's part of the regret, was that I was late to the credit card game. But I think when I got the credit card, I got a credit card that was part of, one of those promotions where it's like, spend this much in this amount of time and you get this amount of dollars back.
Or cash back?
Yeah, you get this bonus or whatever that they say. And so I think the mistake that I made was underestimating how much I could spend quickly, I guess.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I got my credit card right before we went to Vancouver, BC with all our friends.
Okay.
And so I got it, and I was being pretty liberal with it. I was like, yeah, I'll be able to pay it back, and I'm going to get this bonus and all this stuff. I was spending, I think, faster than I should have, trying to get to this $250 bonus. So I think that was a big mistake that I made, not realizing how quickly I could achieve this. I think it was like $3,000 or something in spending to get this bonus. And I was like, I could have just done that by spending normally. Like not, I thought it was higher than what I usually spend basically.
Right.
So I think just being more mindful for that initial credit card bonus thing, not trying to rush it, and realizing that I should be, paying it off immediately, like early on. So I got it in line soon afterwards, but I think sort of that stress about trying to pay it back after the fact initially was a little much. So that was one of my big regrets. The other regret is, I don't know if this is like a mistake for my move to New York for starting school. We're looking for apartments to live in, and I think part of the things we want, we're like dishwasher, washer and dryer, all these different things that seem pretty normal in Seattle but are not normal in New York. One of the big mistakes was going with an apartment that had a broker's fee. And in New York, I don't know how to describe them, but they're just fees that are added on for no reason whatsoever, because we do all the searching. We are on Street Easy every day. We're the people looking through the houses, but there's a broker's fee attached to our signing of the lease, which was initially they put it at 15% of, I think, the yearly rent, which is an extra how many thousands of dollars. And it's the brokers have not really done anything except for unlock the door to the apartment that you're viewing. When I moved, it was very expensive. Like, I don't want to say more expensive than I was planning, but it was very expensive. And the savings that I had built up, it took a little bit of a hit that I wasn't really planning for. And we had secured this apartment pretty close to when we started school. So there wasn't much room to really, look for these no fee apartments. But yeah. I think for people who are moving to New York, I think that's something to definitely be on the lookout for. I know I've seen like TikTok pages that are dedicated just to no fee apartments. So if you can find one, that's definitely what I would go with. I mean, I love our apartment. I think I have a bigger room than I had here in Seattle with you. Closet space is amazing, which is just what I need. That fee was something that I think I would, if I was to do it again, that's something I would try to cut out for sure.
Yeah, and I know at least for your first story regarding credit is confusing. It can be very confusing and overwhelming, especially at the start. It's something that I've had to continuously learn about. And I know that one of my biggest mistakes also was with credit, and that was with you when we went on our first trip to California without our parents. When we went to Pasadena, I believe it was Pasadena. Yeah, I believe so. And I paid for the hotel. I put it on my credit card, and my thought process was, if I put this on my credit card, I pay it off the very next day, I'm going to see a huge boost in my credit score. Yeah. That was the complete opposite of what happened, because in doing so, I almost maxed out my credit card. Even though I paid it off almost immediately, I still took a pretty big hit. Yeah. And that was a good learning lesson to know that once you exceed 30% of your available credit, you're likely going to see a negative impact to your score.
Yeah. I think another regret that I have is that I try to stick with my bank, which I don't know why.
Loyalty.
Yes. But I think for getting a credit card, I wish I would have maybe explored other options at other banks. Because I think after having my credit card now, I feel like the rewards that I get in return are not really benefiting me as much as I wish I could. I wish they would. So I think I wish I would have ventured more towards a travel credit card that I could use for flights and whatnot. Because I feel like when it comes to trips, travel credit cards help a lot covering at least flights and stuff like that.
Right.
So I think that's my next step. But it's something I wish I would have looked at initially instead of just trying to say, I want to stick with the credit cards that my bank offers and just sort of looking at the best return that they have instead of branching out to other ones.
Yeah, and I mean that's honestly one of my biggest regrets as well. And because we traveled a lot in 2022. Since then, continued to travel multiple times a year. And I feel that I haven't been saving any money in doing so relative to how much I've been spending, as far as I'm not being rewarded for what I'm doing. And this year I finally said, okay, it's time for me to, or excuse me, not this year, because it's now 2024. Last year, I had said to myself, I'm going to open up a new credit card, one that has travel benefits. Yeah. But then the process of buying the house happened, and they said specifically, do not open any new credit accounts because that'll impact your score, of course. But that is one thing that I wish I had done sooner. We've talked a lot about money, and then we talked about mistakes and things like that. Growing up and throughout life, we've had very different perspectives in that your focus is on, I don't want to say like focus, but you have had an emphasis on enjoying life in the moment and buying the things that you want to buy that are going to bring you joy or bring you pleasure in that moment. While I have been more proactive in saying, cool, I want this right now, but I don't need it, so maybe I'll get it sometime in the future. Instead, I'm going to save and invest.
Yeah.
And of course, those have played out differently over the long term for the both of us. However, I do want to say thank you, because I think most people don't know this, but you helped change my perspective on money and how money should be spent, and just kind of like life in general. And this kind of especially came up in 2022 when we went to New Orleans. It was during that trip where I finally realized, I was like, I really like traveling. And I really like not being in Washington, not because I hate Washington, but because I realized that as soon as I leave these state lines, it is the only time where I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about social media or keeping up with my business or other things. I'm just present. I'm enjoying whatever food that state has to offer, that city has to offer, trying new things and experiencing new things. And so that realizing that helped me kind of change my perspective, where I was like, all right, like, sure, I should save money and I should continue investing, but I also need to do more to make sure I'm getting value out of my life beyond money.
Yeah.
I mean, that stems from in our childhood. We talked a little bit about our relationship, or well, I didn't talk about my relationship with money growing up, but you talked about yours. And I know that I had more of I was like obsessed with money growing up. I always wanted more, and I was never happy, regardless of how much I earned. And it was just very bad. There wasn't, I mean, granted, it allowed me to accrue more money, but I wasn't happy because I never had enough. And it wasn't really until later on where I was like, all right, chill out. It's not that important. And then, but it really wasn't until, I mean, how old were we in 2022? 25? We turned 2025 or we turned, who knows?
25.
We're 25 or 24, but 25. It wasn't until that time where it really like hit me. Like, oh wow, like I can do more than just focus on growing my money. I can enjoy it a little bit, and so I do want to thank you for that, because I think it was the combination of you and Chichi, our sister, always saying like, oh, like you need to relax, like take a moment to relax every then and again, has helped me not necessarily like take a step back, but also just learn to, amongst all of the work, and all of the planning for the future, like take a moment to just have fun.
Yep.
And so I do want to thank you for that.
I think it's important to try and balance. And I think sort of meet in the middle of where our perspectives are. Like, you're making the money because you want to secure a good future for yourself and your family, but it is important to enjoy it while you never know what's going to happen in the future.
Exactly.
So you want to enjoy it now, not too much, but enough that you'll be able to enjoy it in the future as well.
That somewhat to say that there is no necessarily like right or wrong way. I do think that, let me take that back.
There's a right way, according to Obi.
I think that failing to plan for the future is going to put you at a place where your life is going to be stressful. And I don't think that there is, unless you have family who is willing to provide, take care of you, or you come from a background in which money is just never going to be a concern. I think what is the saying? It's like failure to plan is planning to fail. If you're not taking the steps today to advance yourself in the future, and that goes with education, like doing your homework and studying the same way that it does setting aside money for savings or putting money into investments, or making sure that you're not using your credit card for purchases that you can't ultimately pay for. All of these things culminate into what will be your future. And that is something that ultimately you as an individual have to take responsibility for. Yes, there are, I was about to get crazy. Yes, there are challenges, and ultimately everybody comes from a different background, and we of course grew up middle class, so we didn't have to, I think you mentioned you never have to worry about money. I never had to worry about money. We didn't have to worry about food and other basic necessities, where, we're coming from a place of privilege, where not everybody had that opportunity. I've had the opportunity and the blessing to work with people, adults, and college students from background, like tons of different backgrounds. I think the number one thing that I see with people who are kind of like preparing for the future is they're trying. Mm-hmm. I think that's just the number one thing, is to like recognize, one, oh wow, I'm not where I want to be, or maybe you are where you want to be, and then make sure that you're just drawing out a plan to get to whatever end goal it is that you want. Because if you're essentially just maneuvering through life on a day-to-day, just living in the present and never taking a moment to think about the future and not think about the long-term impacts of your financial decisions or your career decisions and things of that nature, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what that looks like in the future. I don't know. I can't say definitively that it ends up with you being happy.
Yeah, I think there's also, all these unexpected expenses that come up that can really upset your life when you're not planning for, I think you talk about rainy day fund and all these different things. Mm-hmm. So I think when you don't have an eye on the future, anything that happens in the present that's outside of like what you might expect, you won't be prepared for. And that can set you back and really upset whatever you think you're on the line towards.
I know one thing that you and I have talked about is that, and I've mentioned in presentations, is that planning for the future and enjoying life just in the present are not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. You can do both. And I think you've demonstrated that. Granted, our lives took different paths. Mm-hmm. You're still doing amazing things, even though you made a decision not to pursue money, despite me kind of like always saying, Chukuwma, like just go into consulting and
join Solemn.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not supposed to expose work.
And saying like, just start working. Like you can go work in consulting and you could be making $80,000 a year or whatever, as opposed to making a lot less and going to school, where it's just like we were thinking about things two different ways. But look at you right now, where you have a page on Instagram for fashion where you're able to demonstrate because you're a very fashionable individual.
Thanks, man.
Where you're able to display that. And then you're also going to one of the best schools in the country.
Big ups in the world.
Oh, there you go. Talk your talk.
No,
but yeah, no, I think that life turned out okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's all worth it. I think I had the option to stay at UW for grad school and save a lot of money. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't have the relationship I have with my girlfriend now. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be exposed to all the things that New York has to offer. I might have not I went to Kenya this summer, and I probably wouldn't have had that experience. What I thought was, this is my first time traveling internationally. And I was able to do like a solo trip to the coast. And that was the first time I was, by myself on a trip and really enjoying the peace of coast vacation type thing. So I think this program, like being in New York, has given me a lot of different opportunities, a lot of new relationships, a bigger network, all these different things that maybe you can't, quantify in the bank account. Yeah. But I think it's all been worth it for me.
Yeah, and I mean, in a previous episode, Kelvin, who you know, of course, and we talked about paycheck versus passion and deciding on if it's more important to pursue your passion or a paycheck. And of course, I pursued money. I've pursued money. I don't say like it's my essence of being, but it's something that
you're interested in.
Yeah, and it's something I've emphasized while you've always been diligent about pursuing your passion. And your passion took you to Kenya. I've never been outside the country, unless you want to include Canada. And I think that's very cool, and I think that's important. I know that I advocated in that episode that as a college student graduating from college, you should always pursue money. But you can find success doing either or, and ultimately, which is where Kelvin and I agreed, is you have to find a purpose somewhere. Yeah. And money is not one.
Yeah. So. I think, at the end of the day, I think it's really about balancing passion and money. Everything I've studied, I've been very interested, very passionate about, even though, public health is not the most, lucrative career space. There are ways to maneuver in it, I think, to make it work for you. So I think, especially as I head towards graduation in this fall, I'm trying to be very mindful about what are the salaries looking like, and how this program was so I could, upskill myself to give myself more opportunities across a broad spectrum of jobs in the field and, a broad range of salaries, whatever. As we talk about, passion and making money, it's also, and I think my girlfriend Amara has talked about this, it's important to not rely on a job, like a 9 to 5 for this money. I'm interested in fashion. So as I, move through my career, knowing that public health is, for the most part, not, you're not making tech money, you're not making consulting money all the time. It's ways to, make my interest in fashion work for me and, make me money. So I've tried to explore that a little bit with social media and whatnot. But I think, going to this new year, I'm trying to see how I can be more creative with how I'm expressing myself, providing value in a space that is fashion or creative, while I'm also doing my public health work. So hopefully, in between that mix, it'll, provide a good balance of money.
Yeah, no, I got faith in you.
Thanks,
and
man.
I also think that you're in a space where other people might find themselves. As far as I think you mentioned that there's still things that you want to learn as it relates to finance, whether it's investing or credit and so on and so forth. And I don't want to say you're figuring things out, because you got to pretty figure it out.
We're always figuring things out.
But I think you talked about mistakes that you've made and that you're still trying to learn some new ways and become more financially literate.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about advice that you would give to other people, given all of your lived experiences and given how your life has turned out with the decisions that you've made thus far, as it relates to finance. And as we think about delayed gratification, as we think about investing, moving out of your parents' home and things of that nature, what would you tell? I mean, sure, what would you tell the younger version of you, or what would you tell to people who are listening to this episode? What advice would you give?
So I think one thing that I would advise my younger self on, and I think I'm trying to push myself into this year, is to focus more on producing rather than consumption. In terms of food, I spend a lot on food. I was looking through my Mint for the past year, and some of these months were quite crazy.
Yeah, been there.
But the experiences are amazing. But at the end of the day, I think there's some things that can be managed, and spending on food is one thing. I want to be able to look probably at these restaurants that I always plan to go to, and take those meals that they have and make them myself. I think what you lose there is time. That's something that I think I struggle with, especially in school and all the studying with. But I think making more food rather than always spending my money on it is one thing I want to focus on. And that also translates to clothing. I think I've definitely dialed it back from my days in Seattle early on, where I think I would spend a lot more. Now, most of the clothing I get is through thrifting and whatnot. So I do think I already save money where I didn't in the past. Mm-hmm. But also, I think I'm a fashionable guy. So
you are.
To hopefully, try to get the creative sparks going to maybe translate that to producing something that will be of value to people, but also, help me out. Not just scrolling mindlessly on TikTok and seeing all the different fashion people and what they're doing, but doing something myself. Dialing back consumption is, I think, my goal for this year, and also something I would tell my younger self to look more towards, not just looking at others, but looking at how I can provide value and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think shifting from a consumer to a producer mindset, I really like that. I really like that idea, especially around cooking, because I'm pretty sure we're probably going to buy food after this, but
time is short.
I do think it is extremely important to learn to cook and to cook more. And that was it's funny that you say that, because that's a similar conversation I had with Cessa, my girlfriend, about, there's all these things that I like that I buy frequently. Why not just learn how to make them? And I know that when we lived together, we made burgers together. I recently learned how to make fries. And it's just, I think in learning how to cook more things, you learn how easy it is to cook these things. Pasta is I haven't learned. I don't know if I'm going to dive into making pasta. I learned how to make my own sauce.
No.
I do think that's a very admirable goal, and one that anyone can aspire to, especially as we're just starting a new year. Yeah. So I commend you for that. I think that's a very good goal, and I think it's well within your reach.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I turned back to my days of eating sardines and rice.
Oh boy. Okay, well maybe not. I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm going that far.
But yeah, what would you tell your younger self? Do you have any notes?
If I were speaking to my younger self, I think I would just say, it's gonna be okay. I think I stressed a lot about my future and what it would look like. And I know that, I mean, even looking back to middle school and high school, my grades weren't that strong. I mean, we come from a academically gifted family, yourself included, and my grades were not that great. And so I just didn't really know what the future looked like, which is part of where my obsession, if you will, with money started, where I was like, I don't know if I'll be successful, so I better start saving like every nickel now in case I need it in the future. And so I would have just told myself it's gonna be okay.
Yeah,
Because I think if I could, what was that? If I could talk to like my younger self, that like younger me would be very proud of the person that I've become today. So.
Yeah, for sure. Good work. Yeah. Should you share your note that grades don't matter in the end?
That's very true. But yeah, no, to close it out, I think it's been very fun. It's been a goal of mine to film this episode with you. So it's nice that we got it out the way, and I think we'll have to do another, whether it's a follow-up episode or just another episode.
Yeah.
And also get Chichi, our sister, on the podcast. Thank you again for listening to this episode. It was a lot of fun to film with my brother, and so thank you for being here. And I know that it's been like a long time coming to have you here. We also, I mean, the last time we filmed the video together was probably 2021, so it has been a while. So it was a lot of fun to just talk through, I mean, our childhood, college, and things of that nature today. And so I hope for those of you listening that you're walking away, whether it's with new knowledge or inspiration or a new goal, that you did gain something from listening to this episode. I also want to turn it to you for the final word, if there's anything that you would like to add.
Thank you for inviting me to your humble abode. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. I enjoyed the back and forth a little bit. I'm always learning from you, and I'm grateful that I have someone who's more financially minded than myself that is so close to me, or else who knows where I would be.
You'd be all right.
Yeah, but I'm thankful. And when I go out into the streets and I talk to people, they're like, oh, college money habits. Like, everyone knows your work. And so even if it seems like, social media is social media, but when you talk to people like in person, people are reacting with your content and it's resonating with them and they're getting better for it. So you do good work and people are thankful for you.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. Hopefully, once again, you've enjoyed this episode. Also, the first episode of season 2 of Is It in the Budget? And if you are somebody who is making a financial decision, whether it is to invest or it's to save money, or you're in the middle of making a purchase and you don't know if it's the right one, or maybe you're moving to New York and you're looking for a new apartment, don't forget to ask yourself, is it in the budget?